Microaggressions in the local media is really important to understand, and that's why I decided to make it my focus for my capstone research for the 2020 spring semester. The title of my presentation is Microaggressions in the Local Media. My name is Doran, and I'm very proud to show my research to you. So first is, what is microaggression, and why does it matter? Microaggressions are found throughout the world and our society, as well as they make people feel like they are not valued member of their society. This photo that you see here is a very good example of that. When you call someone the whitest black person you know, it's a microaggression against them because it means that you don't believe that they're potentially part of the African American community or the black community. So the focus of my research this semester was actually on the VC Star. Now the VC Star is the local paper within Ventura County. It is also published every single day, and I found it to be interesting because Ventura County is a very diverse community, and as well as, of course, CSU Channel Islands is located within Ventura County. Now there are other newspapers within Ventura County, but VC Star is kind of the staple newspaper of the area, and so this is why I decided to focus on my research. So with my research, I ended up having 3 research questions that I wanted to focus on. My first research question was, is the VC Star, the daily newspaper of the region, keeping voices of the population within a reasonable margin of the county demographics? My second research question was asking, is the VC Star publishing articles that only blames marginalized communities for violence or aggression? And my third research question was, is the VC Star using language that gives the majority community a pass when it comes to violence or aggression? In order to figure out these research questions, we obviously have to figure out the past literature and research that's happened. The first thing that we need to look at is the most common definition that we use in microaggressions, which is done by D.W. Sue, who is by far the best expert when it comes to this type of research. He says, quote, microaggressions are the brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial, gender, sexual orientation, and religious slights and insults to the target person or group. So that is one microaggression that is used by far the most, and like I said, this definition is used pretty much in every single research. Now, what's fascinating about microaggressions in media, it is a very new concept. The first published article was only in 1986, so it's almost 35 years old now. And finally, what's interesting is a lot more research has come out, especially in the last 10 years, but one big study found that a majority of people do not realize they are using microaggressions in their languages or their behaviors in everyday life. So of course, I had to figure out methodology on what I'm going to be doing for my research this year. So what I decided to do was, obviously I'm doing a qualitative research that used textual analysis with the VC Star. I looked at the VC Star every single day for the month of February. There's 2 reasons I picked February. 1, we were still on campus in February, and 2, this was pre-COVID, so the news wasn't dominated by the coronavirus. Lastly, I used a coding system in which I coded the stories themselves, as well as coding the photos that were in the paper. I went through 1,200 pages of the paper and coded over 3,000 articles in the end. So what were the themes I found? And this is the most fascinating aspect. Well, there was 3 themes in the end. The first theme was there was not equal representation in photos or in the stories themselves. The second was that women are not represented within the VC Star. And finally, crime articles are skewed to one race. So let's go with the first theme. The first theme being that there is no equal representation within photos or stories. A majority of the stories and photos especially are focused on white people, especially in the local stories. The other thing was that men give by far the most quotes, which also goes into women are talked about, but never give quotes. And a good example is this paper here. This is the front page of the sports section in February, at the end of February, February 27th. We've got 3 photos. One does not have a human, so it does not get coded. but we have a white basketball player from UCLA. He is verified. The black player does not have a name in the caption. And then down here, we have two local players because they're talking about the boys and girls basketball players of the year for the local high schools in Ventura County. This male player was the player of the year. The female is talked about in the article, but there is no photo of her and she does not give a quote. Whereas the male player had a quote and his coach also had a quote as well. So this shows that there was not equal representation within these photos and also the articles. But with that woman article that we just talked about, it goes right into my second theme. Women are just simply not represented. Even though women make up over almost half of Ventura County, they only accounted for 30% within the paper. This graphic here talks about on the national level how women are only about 30% within the media, and this is very much true within Ventura County. There was only 2 times in the entire 29 days that there was more women quotes than men. And that was because of those 2 issues, there was 2 long-form articles of over 2,000 words talking about a homeless problem that was run by women, a women's group in Ventura, and then also a nurses problem in Thousand Oaks, and they gave a majority of the quotes as well. But by and large, it's dominated by the men. What was also interesting was leading up to the primary, which was on March 2nd, the paper put out issues all the time about the politics that were happening within the local area and also on the national scale. What was fascinating was there was never a single woman political insider or political consultant. And there was only 2 women running for president at that time. That was Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. What was fascinating about it was when they gave quotes, it was only from their rallies or their debates. They never had quotes off to the side, unlike Joe Biden or Michael Bloomberg. Finally, in sports, women simply just did not have a voice. In over 25% of the papers, there was not a single mention of women's sports, either on the local level, on the national level, or on the international level. They were just simply ignored the entire time. So, women are not represented. My final theme that I had was that crime articles are skewed to one race. What do I mean by this? It means that this was the most blatant use of microaggressions within the VC Star. The column lengths were about the same, but Latinx crime had far more descriptors, whereas white crimes did not. And also, Latinx suspects got photos with their articles, whereas white suspects did not. A classic example of this is a screenshot from a February 7th article. This was the public safety briefs, what they put in the paper about 5 times a week. These 2 articles right here talk about crime articles. This article was about a 66-year-old man a 30-year-old man who murdered his 66-year-old mother. He was a white criminal though. There's not a descriptor of him, nor his name, nor anything about him. Just says that he was 31 years old from Thousand Oaks. This article is about an Oxnard man who was suspected of possessing child pornography, but there's a photo of him immediately right there, and within the article there's a lot of descriptors about him, being how many tattoos he had, as well as his height and his weight. This was a common theme throughout the VC Star when they really showed that Latinx crimes, they gave the descriptors and they always had the photos to go with it. So what's the significance of my research? Well, the first significance points that I think comes up is this is arguably one of the first research projects in California that looks at media and microaggressions. So I'm very proud of that. The second thing is that even though we lived in Ventura County, which we all think is very diverse, or maybe we just went to school, which CI is very diverse, there are microaggressions everywhere throughout our society. And finally, I think it's important to understand that with what is going on in the world today, we all want to read the news and understand it, but we need to make sure that we understand what the general concept is within that news and how the media is portraying that and how they're portraying different marginalized communities. So I'd just like to thank you for listening to my research today, and have a great day.